This is truly, truly exciting. And I'm so glad that you've given some time to us. Please give a Sound City welcome to Erin Tonkon. Do you know what? There's some guests where you look at their history and you look at their CV and what they've done, and I'm just like, I could talk for hours and hours. And in fact, let me just read this. I don't think I've ever done this before. Erin, you're New York-based. I love that. I'm dying to go to New York. Producer, engineer, mixer. You began at the age of 16. You attended Clive Davis's Institute and recorded music. You studied with Bob Power, Nick Sansano, and you then started, was it 6 years working with Tony Visconti?
Yes,
so when do you retire?
Hopefully not for a very, very long time.
So, expand that for me, because I almost don't know where to start. That is so young. You have done, and I'm absolutely not going to ask your age, but
I'm 28. I'll be 29 in 3 weeks.
You're kidding.
Yeah, getting up there.
How does that all happen? How did that start? So when it says you began engineering at the young age of 16, because I couldn't find anything else before, I was thinking, hang on, what some prompts. How did that start? How did you think, right, I'm going to start doing this?
So I started, I always played music growing up, but I hated practicing, and I knew I wanted to work in music, but I was
in bands? Were you actually in bands?
I had a little band when I was 14, and played in a funk cover band, just weird kind of stuff. But I was always.
I love that.
Yeah. But I wanted to play with guitar pedals and get weird sounds, and I didn't want to practice, and I didn't know that there was a thing that was called something. And then someone was like, oh, you'd probably like to engineer or produce. And I was like, what? And it's those are the people, with the big boards in the movies. And I was like, oh, wow, that seems powerful.
I want a big board.
Yeah. And then I found I went to a high school that had a recording studio in it, and I started learning how to engineer.
So was that really key for you? Because over here, let's be honest, hey, British people, our schools are just not equipped like they are in America.
This was a very weird school. It was a school I switched to after being unhappy in a normal college prep school, and I found a school that kind of was for kids who had really clear passions and really clear paths and kind of knew what they wanted to do. It was called Fusion Academy. This is in San Diego, and I found this school and basically held my parents hostage until they let me go there. I just held them emotionally hostage until they just gave up and let me go. And thank God. I really think that's why I got to where I am, because I started so young and had such a clear path of what I wanted to do.
Okay, there's two things that's come up there. One, is that then a secret to how your career has gone then, that you have a clear path and understanding of where you want to go? And do you apply that to each individual project you work on?
Yeah, I think that's definitely how I got to where I got to, because I started young and I was prepared at times when opportunity arose for me, and I just wasn't going to take no for an answer. If one path didn't work, okay, then let's try this one, and things worked out. I don't do that when I'm producing. I think that records are, these living, breathing organisms, and that depending on, the artist and the arrangement of the song, that's how I go. What does the arrangement call for? A song will kind of tell you how it needs to be recorded and produced, and I'll kind of hear that and go with that. And I'll try things out. Sometimes they sound wrong, and I'll switch paths. So it's very different to how I sort of got into my career.
I like that. Now, I'm going to say something, and I think this is important. I'm hoping that there's a time where I can speak to someone like yourself who is female and not acknowledge that.
Me too.
Exactly. And I don't think we're at that point yet, and so I don't think I should ignore that. And as a father of 3 children, 2 who are daughters, I think it's important that we acknowledge that, because how many female producers can you think of? And that's the sad thing. So for me as a father of daughters, who recently when I interviewed Lines, an all-female punk band from Manchester, my daughter was just 12-year-old, was over the moon. She's like, I want a guitar, and she's playing with her younger brother who plays drums. It is inspiring. So I suppose my question, has that been difficult for you from the off, from way back when you were 16 and thinking, this is where I want to go? Did you face hurdles as a 16-year-old girl in this business?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't necessarily in this business at 16, but as I started entering studios, like I didn't really know that there was no women doing this, and I was just brought up to like I could be whatever I wanted to be, you know. And my parents just never brought up me being a girl, you know. I mean, I wasn't good at sports anyways. So there wasn't any of those hurdles. I had no interest, you know. And I was never told that I had any limitations because of my, you know, gender. And then when I started working in studios, I realized like, oh, I was, you know, the manager of the first recording studio I worked at was female. So I was like, oh, that's a good sign. But then like all of us kind of interning and assisting there, everyone else was male. And I would notice, you know, then going to classes, like when I started taking classes and working at other studios, like I was just always the only girl. And I feel like, you know, it was the little kind of microaggressions of like, no one would ever ask me to do anything. No, you know, clients would come in. People would ask me to get the tea and ask someone else to choose the microphones. Like my other people I was working with would, you know, question my ability to like wrap a cable or like tell the difference between a dynamic or condenser microphone. You know, these things. And at first I would get very angry, you know, and reactive to it. And then I realized like, all right, I just need to put my head down and like work twice as hard. And that's what I did, you know. And you know, and things have come up throughout my career for sure. Like I don't know what it's like to not be a female in this industry because it's my only experience. But you know, I've had my mentor Tony Visconti has had to step in and on my behalf and sort of tell people, you know, don't treat her like that, or this is, you know, she's a legitimate engineer and producer. And you know, so I was lucky to have like the big guns behind me early on.
And that is why I think it's important that I mentioned that, because the reality for you was that you experienced that, which is utterly, I mean, it's just pathetic, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's people that have experienced a lot worse. You know, I consider myself that I got out, you know, lucky in a way. I mean, there's issues of people, you know, of different races or different orientations, you know, or different gender expressions that certainly have it a lot worse than me as just like a white girl have it, you know. So I have to speak to that. Like, there's people that have had it a lot worse, but it's definitely a thing, you know.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
definitely a thing. But you know, I just worked twice as hard and got twice as good, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And because I could probably, I could sit and listen to you and all those anecdotes and moments that you had, and I'd feel so angry and downtrodden, as mentioned earlier, that it would be useless. But you have a very positive attitude about that, don't you? And being an example to females and showing that, hang on, we can make progress in this industry.
Sure. And there's also a lot more women getting into this industry, and there are, you know, quite a bit of producers and engineers that are female, and I've sort of formed a group of friends that I can talk to about these specific issues. And you know, and there's like the women's audio mission, which we have in the States, and an online database. It's called like EQL, that shows all, you know, you can search anywhere in the world and search for your, like, whatever you're specifically looking for, and find female or non-binary people that work in those fields. And so I just think that there's a lot happening now that I feel way better than I did starting out.
So there's, you see, because I mean, I wouldn't see it,
Sure.
But in there, you are actually seeing real progress being made.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
And it starts with conversations about it. It starts with people realizing like 2% of the industry is female. I mean, that is insane.
2%.
Like, that's insane. 2% of like the you know, production engineering, that side of the industry is female. I mean, I think that's like the greatest gender disparity probably in any any field that doesn't require you to be one gender. You know, it's insane.
Bonkers.
But people are talking about it and realizing it now, and then people are giving voices to women and people that aren't male, you know, and I think it encourages other people to get involved and see that you can do it. Because that's like why representation matters, and you know, and they talk about it in television and film of like, it's so important for like a child to see themselves represented in whatever on screen and in music industry and whatever they want to do, because it just creates these connections of like, oh, I could do that too, you know. And I think it's true even if you're working behind the scenes in the music industry.
I think that's great. In fact, you know what's just come to mind? I don't know if any of you saw, I think it was earlier this year or the end of last year, that Fender had released some stats that they are refocusing their marketing to females, because 48% of their sales were to females buying guitars.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I was like, I think that's part of why I started playing guitar, but I had all these like older male friends that would like tease me about playing guitar and like, oh, you're never going to be any good, and I stopped playing, you know?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I still play a bit, but I think I probably could have been really good, you know, and I let that scare me off, but I found another path.
I was going to say, you found a good one. So let's get to that then.
Sure.
How do you then get from where you were to Tony Visconti? How did that happen?
A lot of hard work and just setting my sights. Yeah, I mean, that was like, you know, well, they say luck is opportunity meets preparation or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much what it was. So I, you know, had been interning and working at studios in San Diego, and you know, there's like 3 recording studios in San Diego, and someone was gonna have to die for me to get a job. You know, I mean, there was just no way in. And I always wanted to live in New York. I'd spent some time on the East Coast, and you know, my parents were like, I had dropped out of college. I initially went to college for journalism, but was only working on music and hated it, and left to go work in recording studios. And my parents were keen on me going back to college, understandably so. And I was told you don't need a degree to do this, which is true, but I needed connections. So I applied to New York University's Clive Davis Institute with the intention of like, this is my shot, like looking at who the professors were, like, you know, Bob Power, Nick Insano, Questlove was one of my professors. Like,
was one of your professors?
Yeah. It's like the coolest school in the world. It was a dream.
Can you imagine that? Going to lectures. Oh, look who it is today.
I think Ice Cube taught a class this year. Or no, sorry, Q-Tip.
Q-Tip.
I'll forever
That's even better
confuse
for me.
I mean,
is
it
amazing.
was just, you know,
Questlove,
Stevie
Q-Tip.
Wonders stopped in. Like, it's an amazing school.
What was the process to get into that? Because if you say you sort of had no qualifications per se, what did you need to show?
I mean, I had qualifications. I didn't have connections. You know, I didn't know anyone really in the industry. So my qualifications, I had been engineering for years. I had worked in radio. I had worked at record labels. You know, but it was extremely difficult school academically even to get into. And
what age were you as well?
So I initially went to college at 18, left at 20, and then was going back to school at 22, which was the time I should have been graduating.
So the Clive Davis came at sort of 22.
Yeah, I was older than everyone else. But, you know, I applied as a transfer student, and I was like one of 4 accepted. And I was like, it was the happiest day of my life. It was like, well, at that point.
Yeah,
I've had
absolutely.
many amazing things since then, but I was overjoyed, and I got into that school, and I got to skip some classes for engineering, and I had you know, all the students were kind of looking for internships, and Nick Insano said to me, like, you should really look for a mentor. You've been working in studios. You don't need to go clean toilets at a recording studio, make coffee, which is a rite of passage. Everyone has to do it. I did it, you know.